All right, so in the next two slides, I'm going to explain everything that's wrong in American education. No problem, right? In my study of this, I've kind of summarized it down to 6 ideas. You may think there are other ideas or these ideas are wrong, but this I think is a really good way of looking at this, particularly with an instructional. I place a lot of emphasis on the instructional issues, but on this slide, and then I do more of the organizational issues on the next one. So the instructional issues, where this whole issue starts, is that education schools, unfortunately, promote well-intended but misleading ideas about how to properly teach various subjects. For instance, reading. Frederick County Public Schools, up until recently, has done balanced literacy and whole language types of approaches that are the least effective approaches. And we have decades of research and a national reading panel and all kinds of evidence, including brain scans with MRIs. I mean, we're talking empirical evidence, right? Not even qualitative studies. Like, we're down to the brain. We can tell you which 4 parts of the brain are involved in reading and which ones you have to train based on the condition you have. I mean, it's science, right? But up until recently, Frederick County, it's like, what, 2 months ago, Frederick County was pursuing what they learned in education school, which is a balanced literacy approach instead of a scientifically based reading instruction approach, which has lots and lots and lots of evidence. So then, okay, so you go to education school as a teacher to get certified, and you learn these ideas, right? So now you're certified in things that are often misleading. Not all the ideas, of course, are misleading, but often misleading. Does not contribute to teachers' effectiveness. So there's lots of studies on this too. Being certified versus not, there's really not a lot of difference, right? So there's lots of studies that look at, does teacher certification actually make you more effective? Typically not in the long term. Depends on the study. Some of them will show maybe for the first 18 months, certified teachers might have a slight advantage in some areas, and then after that it's a wash, right? And it doesn't matter. Also, teaching experience after about the first 2 to 3 years, and studies will vary, some go up to 4 or 5. It doesn't really matter. So we pay our teachers, as you know, more money every year as though they're like linearly getting more effective, but that's not actually the case. In fact, when teachers go and they're towards their retirement, there's a demonstrated decline in performance. They've actually charted that in the research. So, bottom line for this one though is, the other thing I should say is, teacher certification is required, it's legally required. So I'm a computer science person. I'm not legally required to have a certificate that says I can do computer science, right, to get hired. But you are if you're a teacher. You have to have a teaching certificate. And there isn't a great rationale for that because the difference in effectiveness is very little to none. And some studies, like in science, will actually say it's better to hire scientists than to hire a certified science teacher because scientists can actually teach better. So the evidence isn't there to justify requiring this. And what that means is guys like me, so I'll give you my story. So I'm a computer science person. I have 2 degrees in computer science. I started a company to train Maryland computer science teachers in teaching computer science. According to the state of Maryland, I am not permitted to ever be in a classroom. I am not certified. I couldn't do it. I started a school, as many of you know, the Frederick Classical School, charter school, #1 in the state. But I'm out of the applicant pool. I cannot apply. I will never be considered. When we had the Frederick Classical Charter School, we were hiring for that. We had a gentleman who was a PhD in classical education from Oxford who wanted to be our principal. He's not qualified, couldn't even enter the applicant pool. He wasn't certified. So here's a guy, one of the best schools in the world, PhD, taught in a private school, had experience. He wasn't just academic with no experience. He had a full package, automatically out of the applicant pool.
And this is specific to public education?
Public education. Private schools, some do require certification, most don't.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on the school. I can tell you at Phillips Exeter, so one of the top high schools, they will not hire you if you have an education degree because they view it as a mark of academic inferiority. And we'll get to why they would think that. There's evidence for
I'm
that.
sorry, can you just say that one more time?
Phillips Exeter, so one of the top high schools, private high schools in the country, will not hire you if you have an education degree because they don't view it as, they view it as a negative.
I'm just going to add something. And so what we have now with the blueprint, the
Right.
coming, from the state level, is that now they're encouraging, they're not mandating, but they're encouraging these teachers to get this NEA certification.
National board certification?
National board
Yes.
certification.
Yeah.
And, I've asked that question, so what's the value of that?
Right.
Because you're gonna get a big little
You get a boost
You
in
get a
your
boost
salary.
in your salary
Yeah.
once you become certified. It's a 3-year process.
Yes.
It's a lot of time, a lot of energy, and nobody can really tell you what the real value of that is.
Yeah, and
To the teacher or the student.
correct. I can tell you what I think the value is. So what it does is it identifies teachers that were already effective. So the most ambitious teachers that want the raise are the most ambitious teachers that want the raise probably are the ones applying for this.
Okay.
And so really it's more like self-selection. It's not that going through the process makes you a better teacher, it's that the better teacher is probably the ones more likely to go through the process,
Okay.
right? Is what I've seen from the research.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's more like folks that are, hey, Anna Meredith, how are you? You're on candid camera, just so you know.
Is this live?
So this is, well, we're not live streaming, but, so that's the teacher, that's what the national board does, is it increases your expenses by, I don't know if it's really worth it, because we're really just identifying the teachers that would have been effective anyway,
Yeah.
right? So, and the national board, so if you look at the national board's criteria for reading, it's balanced literacy, right? And if you look at the things that they encourage, it's all the sort of trendy practices, like, well, you should be a reflective teacher, and we're gonna have you do reflective opportunities and think about your teaching. So, okay, well, how does that make me better? It's like me reflecting on myself. I need an expert to tell me, like, if I'm teaching phonics, I should do it in the following order. I should try to identify these sounds. I should have certain tests that I give the kids. Like, you want it to be more like a surgeon or a doctor, that there is a prescribed protocol for how you diagnose and treat, like, reading difficulties. You would want a national board certification to have that and have knowledge of that be part of the certification. That's not what they offer. What they offer is an opportunity to self-reflect. So that's unfortunate, because you're not really getting outside expertise. You're your own sort of evaluator, and how's that gonna go? You're not gonna get an outside perspective. It's not that they don't do things. They do submit, criteria that other people look at. They do submit like lesson plans and things last time I look at it, and they have to like create a portfolio. There is some outside evaluation, but it's a lot about, the other thing I'll say, it's a lot about like you have proper teaching attitudes. So it's like you have the demeanor for teaching and things like that. It's just not technical, right? So my perspective I'm coming from, you'll kind of see this throughout the theme. Teaching is really technical, especially reading instruction, which I have a lot of background in. And you have to master the technicality. I view teachers like surgeons. Like, you should master techniques and know multiple options and medicines and proper tests and diagnoses that actually will help you teach a kid to read or learn math or whatever it is. It should be more like that. It's treated more like an art, right? And so there's artful aspects to teaching, but I think we're missing the technicals through the certification process. All right, so then administrators then, they go, they're certified, they get administratively certified, right? And they often promote ineffective academic programs and management changes, right? Things that you would not do in like a private business get done in public education a lot. What often happens, and I'll talk about this when we get into details, is a new program comes out for math, like Turk Investigations in Math. Those of you remember this fiasco in Frederick County a few years ago? And it was math without math in it. So they didn't teach you how to like carry and borrow and do the normal algorithms. You were to count squirrels. I kid you not. You were to draw pictures. And this was viewed as more authentic learning. They were, for a while, Frederick County Public Schools was into this trend of so-called authentic learning, which meant that the teacher was supposed to teach less, the students were supposed to discover the concepts themselves, and that, basically the emphasis was on having hands-on experiences that were supposedly going to help these kids to be more flexible learners and retain the information. There's no evidence that supports any of that. It's actually the opposite. More teacher-led stuff tends to do better. But that was the belief system that was proposed, and we spent years, and we ultimately got that program. I was one of the people leading the charge against it. We ultimately got that program removed in favor of a more traditional math program. And if you Google Turk, it's T-E-R-C, it stands for something. At Turk Math, you can see like websites all across the country of parents just up in arms about a math program that didn't have math in it. Another fun math story was in California. I had friends who had a math program. They were math people. One of them was like an astrophysicist. And she said she was opposing this program, and they called it the Purple Book. And except for the page numbers, there were no numbers in the math book. It was cartoons and like constructed as activities. You're supposed to kind of teach math yourself. It's crazy, right? Yeah, so it's all this approach to education called constructivism, which is this idea that's partially true but misapplied. Well, we all construct meaning. Well, yes, meaning's personal. You do it based on your own experiences. Well, based on that idea, then kids basically have to like teach themselves. They could never absorb information properly from a teacher in direct instruction. But we know from education, if you want to have, from education research, if you want to have more effective teaching, you have to have a plan. You have to systematically teach the prerequisites and then have them practice those skills, and then those sub-skills build up into other skills. For example, like long division. We can't just start out doing long division. You have to know how to multiply, right? You have to know how to divide. You need to know your math facts. There's a lot of things to do that long division. You need to know there's a whole series of prerequisites, and you have to systematically take kids through a course of study to get to the point where they can do that, right? And you can do that more effectively through direct instruction, generally speaking,